the Vatican hacked, Chinese students kidnapped themselves, and a communist power struggle threatens to bring down Xi Jinping. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. You know, God may be all-knowing, but the Vatican? Apparently not so much. In fact, sometimes the Vatican can't even see what everyone else can see. Back in 2018, the Vatican made a deal with the Chinese Communist Party. Look, just because the Communist Party ruthlessly suppresses Catholics doesn't mean the deal was unholy. It was unholy and stupid. The deal gave the officially atheist Communist Party the power to help appoint bishops in China. It also officially recognized several bishops that the party had previously appointed against the wishes of the Vatican. Letting the atheist Communist Party appoint your religious leaders doesn't make a lot of sense, but on the bright side, surely the relationship between the Vatican and China would be great after signing that deal, right?
Hackers linked to the Chinese government have reportedly infiltrated the Vatican's computer networks, including communications with the Catholic diocese in Hong Kong. Among the targets was the head of the Hong Kong study mission, who is seen as the de facto representative of Pope Francis to China.
Wow, who knew betrayal would be part of a deal with the Chinese Communist Party? In fact, the Vatican is said to be hacked from China before talks with Beijing. Wait, what kind of grammar is this? What's that, Shelley? All right, I'm being told this is a special type of passive voice. The technical term is the "please let us back into China" passive voice, since, China recently expelled New York Times reporters. I mean, who knew betrayal would be part of a deal with the Communist Party? Anyway, the Vatican hack was detected by cybersecurity company Recorded Future. They said a Chinese state-sponsored hacking group they've named Red Delta targeted the Vatican and other Catholic organizations. This is significant. The Chinese Communist Party has often used cyber attacks on religious groups like Buddhist Tibetans, Muslim Uyghurs, and Falun Gong practitioners outside China. But this is the first time that we know of where they targeted a religious organization as powerful and secretive as the Vatican. That's why the Pope's hat is so big. It's full of secrets. And those are secrets the Chinese Communist Party wants to know. Specifically because the Vatican and China are supposed to meet in September for talks about renewing that deal to appoint bishops. But maybe now the Vatican will realize those bishops are just pawns, and they'll back out before it's checkmate. I'm pretty good at checkers. We all know the Chinese Communist Party covered up the coronavirus, but it looks like they also could have destroyed evidence. That's according to University of Hong Kong infectious disease expert Professor Kwok Yun Yuan. He was involved in the investigation of Wuhan and told the BBC physical evidence was destroyed and the response to clinical findings was slow. And just remember, the Communist Party's cover-up of the coronavirus is what helped it spread around the world, putting us in the position where we can't even kiss our pets anymore. I'm sorry, this has been a very difficult time for me. Senior McFluffberg, I still love you even if I can't kiss you. Meanwhile, another wave of the coronavirus seems to be spreading from the northeastern Chinese city of Dalian. Dalian has been linked to cases in 9 other Chinese cities, including Beijing. If you watch our other show, America Uncovered, you'll know about the arrest of a Chinese military researcher who was hiding out in the San Francisco Chinese consulate. And if you don't watch America Uncovered, you should check out that episode for more on that story, including how the FBI figured out that she was lying about being in the military. It's pretty funny. That comes after the US shut down the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas, and China retaliated.
China's foreign ministry announced as of 10 a.m. Monday morning the US consulate in the Chinese city of Chengdu has closed. China had given the closure orders on Friday, with just 72 hours to vacate.
And after this short break, we'll go to Hong Kong, where things are going well for the people in power. Welcome back. Over in Hong Kong, things are not great. 4 ex-members of a former pro-independent student group have been arrested under the new national security law. That's the law that Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam said would only affect an extremely small minority of people, but it ended up affecting literally everyone in the world. I mean, who knew betrayal would be part of a deal when Hong Kong was given to the Communist Party? One of the people arrested was 19-year-old Tony Chung, and he has the honor of being the first political figure arrested under the national security law. Chung had started an organization called Student Localism for students who wanted Hong Kong independence. But they had disbanded before the national security law went into effect. Hong Kong police said they arrested 4 students aged 16 to 21 based on social media posts. Speaking of social media, the Hong Kong police announced the arrest on Twitter and used a new hashtag, HKIndependence, which then began trending. And now, under the national security law, Hong Kong police have no choice but to arrest themselves for inciting secession. Meanwhile, Benny Tai, a Hong Kong University professor and a leader of the 2014 Umbrella Movement protest, has been fired. If he wishes to appeal the decision, he would have to either go through the university's chancellor, Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam, or a judicial review. I'm sure he'll get a fair hearing. And in other terrible Hong Kong news, the government has banned at least 12 Hong Kong pro-democracy candidates from running in this September's Legislative Council elections, including Joshua Wong. And there could be further disqualifications ahead. According to a government spokesperson, candidates were disqualified because lawmakers cannot promote independence or self-determination for Hong Kong, seek intervention from foreign governments, object in principle to the national security law, or express an intention to vote down any legislative proposals, appointments, funding applications, and budgets introduced by the HKSAR government after securing a majority in the LegCo so as to force the government to accede to certain political demands. Wait, they can't vote against Hong Kong government proposals or budgets. Why have a legislature at all? Why have elections? Well, don't worry, because that's a problem for a future time. There are rumors that the Hong Kong government might delay the 2020 legislative election for an entire year because of the coronavirus. All this comes after a huge number of people showed up earlier this month to vote in pro-democracy primary elections, which is a good indication that the pro-democracy candidates would win big in September, like they did last year in local district council elections. So now, the Hong Kong government is not only considering delaying the legislative election for a year, but it's also trying to disqualify all of the opposition from running. That's on top of a system that's already rigged to give the pro-Beijing establishment a constant majority in the legislature anyway. Sounds like the government is very confident that they have the support of the Hong Kong people. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is getting more and more concerned about Hong Kong. New Zealand has just suspended its extradition treaty with Hong Kong. The UK did the same thing last week. Plus, the UK and the US are getting mighty suspicious about that possible election delay in Hong Kong. Speaking of total scams, Australia says Chinese students are targets in virtual kidnapping scams. Here's what's happening. A lot of Chinese students are stranded in Australia and other countries because of the coronavirus. China won't let them back in. Then, one day, these students get a call from scammers speaking Mandarin saying they're with the Chinese government. The scammers then tell the students they've been charged with a crime and need to pay a huge fee or else. So far, it sounds like these scammers really understand the Chinese Communist Party. How does a Chinese student get the money? Well, scammers instruct victims to cease contact with their family and friends, rent a hotel room, and take photographs or video recordings that depict them bound and blindfolded. These files are then shared with the victims' relatives overseas. So the scammers scare the students into faking their own kidnapping, and then their parents freak out and send money to the scammers. This year, 8 known incidents of virtual kidnappings have been reported, with scammers targeting Chinese international students and successfully obtaining $3.2 million in ransom payments. $3.2 million? Mom, Dad, if you're watching, I have been kidnapped. Please send money to my bank account. And stay tuned after the break, because China's top Communist Party members are engaged in a power struggle that threatens to bring down Xi Jinping. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. So the Chinese Communist Party is well known for its internal factional power struggles, which could determine the future of China. Now, sure, there are political power struggles in every country, but in China, they don't have democracy. So every Chinese official gets their position through power struggles. I guess you could say power struggles are like the Communist Party's version of elections. And you know what that means? It's time for another episode of our favorite communist soap opera, General Hostility. Previously on General Hostility, a life-or-death power struggle rages on between current Chinese leader Xi Jinping and a political clique tied to former leader Jiang Zemin. Xi Jinping launches an anti-corruption campaign that purges more than 1 million officials tied to Jiang. That includes Zhou Yongkang, the former head of China's powerful security apparatus, the PLAC. It controlled China's police, courts, and prisons. But as Xi positions himself to be supreme leader, old allies could become enemies. Is the final battle coming? That show has everything. It's been a while since we've done an update on the factional infighting within the Chinese Communist Party, and there are several major developments. First, big picture, Xi Jinping is in trouble. He was appointed as a compromise candidate without a huge power base, which means that in the power struggle, he's had to amass a tremendous amount of personal power, or he'd get squashed by the faction tied to former leader and toad in the hole, Jiang Zemin. That's what happened to former leader Hu Jintao, which made him sad. How did Xi avoid Hu's fate? Usually by purging some official tied to Jiang and putting himself in charge of the organization instead. That's why Xi is now known as the chairman of everything. And let me tell you, he's done some great work as the chairman of the People's Karaoke Club. However, life for Xi isn't all covers of Girls' Generation. As chairman of everything, Xi Jinping also gets the blame for everything. And there's been a lot to be blamed for recently. First, the coronavirus outbreak. Besides just the scary pandemic part, the coronavirus hit the Chinese economy harder than anything since the 1970s. That's back when Mao had the brilliant idea that communist China really shouldn't have an economy. But beyond that, the Chinese Communist Party's cover-up of the coronavirus has turned the Western world against the Chinese regime, which often means against Chinese companies. Yeah, funny that. The UK was going to make a deal with Huawei, but then British Prime Minister Boris Johnson got the coronavirus. And now he's changed his mind about Huawei. Frankly, everything is going wrong for the Communist Party. There's been growing global criticism of their concentration camps in Xinjiang and their oppression in Hong Kong. And to top it all off, there's unprecedented flooding in most of China. So, you know the solution to China's problems, right? Open a research center on Xi Jinping thought on diplomacy. If you don't know what Xi Jinping thought is, well, it's not super clear. But you might think of it as his version of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, plus economic growth with a sprinkle of concentration camps and a community of common destiny with mankind, which means let the Chinese Communist Party take over stuff, but internationally. Xi Jinping thought was added to China's constitution in 2018. That was the same time they removed term limits for Xi Jinping, so he could be Presitator for life. And this is big, because ever since Mao Zedong, the Communist Party was run according to what they called collective leadership. Basically, after all the economic and political disasters Mao personally created, no one wanted a single strongman ruler calling all the shots. But it looks like Xi Jinping is headed into Mao territory fast. This is an article by Xi Jinping in the Communist Party's flagship ideological journal, Qiushi. I say article pretty loosely. It's more like 18 quotes from Xi slapped together. Hey, you know, if they got enough quotes together, maybe they could turn it into a book. And then everyone can wave it around to show how they're an expert on Xi Jinping thought. Anyway, the article in Qiushi was the lead story in all the major Chinese state-run media. And the basic idea is that party leadership is absolutely necessary. And the core of the party is Xi Jinping. And that means Xi Jinping is gearing up for a fight. You can get a sense of where things are going by little hints in Chinese state-run media. Take this front page of the People's Daily. Xi Jinping, big front and center, surrounded by business leaders, telling them to be more patriotic. And then way down here with a small picture is State Council Premier Li Keqiang, who is nominally number 2 in the party. Li Keqiang is not in Jiang Zemin's faction, but it's long been rumored that Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang do not get along, and they're both trying to undermine each other. It's like a mini side power struggle. Like, for example, Xi Jinping having a big meeting with business leaders when Li Keqiang is supposed to be in charge of the economy. And here's a section on the state-run Xinhua website that's just for reports on Xi Jinping. Wow, look at that. Remind you of anything? Anyway, last month, Xi Jinping did an inspection tour of some villages in rural China. He talked about his goal, to make China a moderately prosperous society. Yes, that's his actual propaganda slogan, a moderately prosperous society. You don't want to be too ambitious. He has the same attitude toward weight loss. And again, in the party's ideological journal, Qiushi, she wrote that China is very close to being moderately prosperous because there are 400 million people in the middle class. This was at the end of May, after China was shut down for the coronavirus. But while Xi Jinping was talking about how great everything is, Premier Li Keqiang was talking about how terrible everything is. He said 600 million Chinese people earn only $140 a month. That's not enough to pay for rent on a one-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city. So we're getting very different messaging from two top leaders of China. With so many people unemployed, Li Keqiang has been promoting what he calls a street vendor economy. Basically, people can sell stuff on the streets. That's moderately prosperous, right? Well, here's where state-run media can give you clues to power struggles in the Chinese Communist Party. State-run media first promoted the street vendor economy, but began running articles criticizing the idea on June 5th. Since then, each provincial and city government delivered conflicting information on whether or not street vendors would be allowed to sell their wares. That doesn't sound like the street vendor economy has the approval of the core leader. But on top of that power struggle, there's also the bigger, ongoing power struggle between Xi Jinping and Jiang Zemin. Top officials have announced a purge of the PLAC, the Political and Legal Affairs Commission. That's China's massive security apparatus that was backed by Jiang Zemin's guy, Zhou Yongkang, who is basically a human thwomp. Xi Jinping purged Zhou Yongkang 5 years ago, and then replaced him with his own protege, Chen Yixin. This month, Chen hosted a meeting to describe what he calls the cleansing campaign. The PLAC teams in the whole country are impure, unjust, and lack executive force. Some members even violate law and discipline. They are bad horses, have bad impact, and have done great damage. We have to turn the blade to face ourselves in order to treat the problem. which I think is very exciting. Xi Jinping had talked about purging tigers and flies from the Communist Party. And now this guy is talking about purging bad horses. It's like the Communist Party is some kind of animal farm. Now, Chen said there were 6 groups that would be targeted. PLAC officials who interfere in the judicial system, who operate companies, who own shares of private companies or lend money with interest, whose spouses or children operate illegal business, who release prisoners early after being bribed, and who control criminal cases. In other words, there's going to be a lot of purges happening in Chinese businesses and the legal system. Already this year, 2 high-ranking PLAC officials have been ousted. Sun Lijun was punished for serious violations of discipline and the law. The other was Fu Zhenghua. They were both promoted by a former PLAC chairman, Meng Jianzhu. Meng himself was a key player in Jiang Zemin's faction. So why is the purge of the PLAC happening now? Well, coming up in August is the party leadership's annual summer meeting at the beach resort of Beidaihe. Think of Beidaihe as the Chinese Communist Party's executive corporate retreat. You know, lots of relaxing backstabbing. Beidaihe is where Xi Jinping still has to answer to other current and former party leaders. And given everything that's happened this year, it probably won't be so pleasant. Which is why Xi Jinping is going on the offensive now, before the meeting. I can't wait for the next episode of General Hostility. Next time on General Hostility, as Communist Party leaders get ready for some fun in the sun, what creature lurks in the waters at Beidaihe? And that's it for this week on China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
In China, something can be illegal, but still in common practice. For example, bribery, or intellectual property theft, or Uber. But you know, there's a common Chinese saying, "La schmaz." What's that, Shelley? Oh, okay. I'm being told no Chinese people ever say that. At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views on an episode, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people and counting. Ride in luxury to your destination in only double the amount of time it would take you to fly there. Dreams come true. And China is the little engine that could. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face.
It's kind of ironic that I'm the minority in a show about China. People in the comments, they'll be like, "You're a traitor." I'm being a patriot. This is my way of showing that I love the country that I came from.
Matt, Shelley, and I went to the Philippines to disputed waters, the Scarborough Shoal.
China and the Philippines claim the Scarborough Shoal. The Chinese military is asserting its claims in the South China Sea, so there's a dispute.
We had to take a rickety little Filipino fishing boat surrounded by threatening Chinese Coast Guard vessels.
Chris planted the China Uncensored flag, and then we got away with it. Chris, Shelley, our cameraman, and I went to the Waldorf Astoria in New York, hoping to interview the leader of China, Xi Jinping.
Oh, we are being helped. Going to...
What is it, China Uncensored?
China Uncensored, yeah. I don't suppose there's a chance I could use it.
Down the stairs.
The lead security guard followed us out and said we were banned for life from the Waldorf Astoria. Chris Chappell here right outside of Mongkok. Our camera guy is in there right now. He's seen people getting beat by police. Police are trying to tear down the tents. Things are wild now.
People would say things to us like, "My professor plays China Uncensored for our class." To see people really believe in what we were talking about was life-changing for all of us.
One word you would use to describe Chris Chaplin.
Committed.
Hilarious.
Engaging. Intriguing.
Have you heard of China Uncensored? Great comedy show. Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? It's starring me.
It's more and more obvious that China is having a major influence on the U.S.
The way that the US is treating China now, it will start to affect people's lives, and they'll need somewhere to go to learn about that.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? 中国解密. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the only show available on TV or the internet. It will be the sole source of edutainment worldwide. Have you heard of China Uncensored?
I have.
You actually have? He's heard of China Uncensored.
I love China Uncensored.